Screen
Right,
now.
welcome everybody to the Atheist Society on the 13th of June 2024. We're very pleased tonight to welcome a new speaker, which Hein Htet. And I'd like to note that how we got together was that on Facebook, as you might know, if you like things, you get more of them. So I get a lot of atheist posts coming up in my feed, and through that I made contact with a group called Rationalist Thinkers, which are based in various countries, including India and Burma and elsewhere. And perhaps Heen will like to tell us about that group, of which he's a member. So anyway, having made contact with them, I invited anyone in that group who wanted to make a presentation to the Atheist Society to do so. And so we've got 10, and later on we've got another speaker in August, I think. So it's very good to have some new speakers to our Atheist Society group. Without further ado, let's hand over to you, Hein.
So let me introduce a bit on me and the group that I'm affiliated with. So I'm Hein. Arabic name is Abu Bakr. So I'm ethnically Bengali and Burmese. So I was born in Burma, but my family heritage has the Bengali descendant and some ethnicities from Burma as well. So I'm a big of mix. So I have like half Burmese, half Buddhist. So that's from my mother's side. Half Islam, half Bengali. That's from my dad's side. So I'm a mix. At the same time, Buddhist. At the same time, Muslim. I was raised at both at the same time, and then I studied the religion and so on, and then I became an atheist. Politically atheist. I think that would be more appropriate for me. And in terms of like groups that I'm affiliated with, I'm affiliated with a group called Burmese Atheists. So that's a group that was founded in 2015 in Burma. So that was founded by a ex-Muslim anarchist organizer from Burma. So he founded Burmese Atheists and recruited a lot of humanists, atheists, rationalists, and all the like postmodern philosophy kind of people from a lot of different society, like Lacanian, existentialists, and so on. So like Burmese atheists is just like the mass movement that includes a lot of humanists, atheists, free thinkers, religious reformists, and so on. So I'm a spokesperson of that at the moment, and I recently affiliated with Progressive Atheists as well. So that's basically me. And so, as you might know, Burma is a Buddhist majority country. So back then, it was popular for peaceful pagodas, peaceful monks, and so on. But it also was popular for its dictatorships, the military dictatorships, and so on. And it struggled for democracy for almost a century now, almost 8 to 9 decades since 1940s. So Burma has a long history of that. But given like after 2020, after 2019, after 2020, Burma is more well known for its genocide against Rohingya, like particularly Rohingya Muslims, and that was a decades-long issue, but it was brought into the international community in 2019 through ICJ. So International Criminal Courts of Justice, they sued the country and its military dictatorship. So that makes Burma famous again, but not in a good way, in a bad way. So, and Burma has this French nationalist idea called political Buddhism. So that is the idea that has the politically right wing, ultra nationalist, and religious fundamentalist kind of approach. So that is a bit oxymoronic because Buddhism in the Western world is has this reputation of peaceful, secular, and inclusive. We could say, like in today's time, it is woke. It is inclusive. It is acceptable of LGBTs and so on. But in Burma, we have a different kind of Buddhism. It doesn't necessarily mean Buddhism is bad or that bad. We have this political Buddhism that is appropriated by the right-wing movements that are xenophobic in nature and that are racist in nature. So we had to push it back. And so this presentation will give you a bit of a historical roots of it and explain how this political Buddhism grew off out of a religion that is well known for its pacifistic and peaceful teachings. Because unlike other religions, there is no literal text that is calling for non-believers to be dead and so on in Buddhism, not even a word and so on. But however, it is still appropriated by the right wing for their political gains. So it was started like there was a long nationalist agenda when it comes to Buddhism and so on, but it reached to peak around the Cold War when Soviet and the U.S. imperialism was fighting against each other. There was this big propaganda of communism being anti-religion. And as you all might be aware that around 1940s, 1930s, these were the time we see a lot of like left-wing regimes that are authoritarian. So Burma also suffered the same fate. A lot of people in Burma, almost all the politicians, they were left wing. So a lot of pro-US imperialists government and they are a liberal establishment. They had to be anti-communist. Some fractions they are for good intention, some fraction they are for bad intention. So what happened is they try to push back the imperialism of Soviet Union, and that intends they nurture a political Buddhism that is anti-communist and religious fundamentalist. And also the British colonialism also plays a role as well. So Burma back in the old days, it was colonized under British India. So when they colonized India, British governed Indian through their own states, like British directly colonized the India. But when it comes to Burma, they don't do it directly. They govern that through British India. So there is British, there is India, and then Burma is at the bottom. So Burma is colonized through India by the British. So what happened is instead of seeing this structure, a lot of Burmese people they see British and Indian as their oppressor. They don't really have the proper analysis of how the things are. So they don't really see the normal working class British people and the imperialist, colonialist ruling class. They don't see the difference between the working class Indians and they don't really see the ruling class who are pro-British in the sense. They don't really see the differences. So that caused a lot of issue in Burma. So that has its roots of xenophobic, anti-Indian, anti-Muslim bigotry in Burma. So one, this heritage of Muslims and Indians being the oppressor for multiple decades during the colonial era and being the like the rich class are always trying to oppress the Burmese peasants and so on. So this has this side effect of hating the British and Indians as they are oppressors. So they didn't really see the class structure. They don't really see the root cause of it, but they see it from the race lens. And they didn't really see the differences between these communities as well. For example, for Indians, there are a lot of castes like Brahmins, Dravidians and so on. That most of the Burmese people, since given they are like poor economic issues and so on, they didn't really see the differences between Indians. So this has this roots of anti-Indian racism and anti-Muslim racism in Burma. Because a lot of police forces during the colonial era, most of them were Sikh, like Punjabis, and most of them were Muslims. So when people see police, British Indian police uniform, they see Muslims, Punjabis, and Indians. So that has one roots of anti-racism against the Indians and Muslim as well. And Burma was originally and indigenously Buddhist for centuries. It has a lot of like pagan elements and so on, but Buddhism has been like its kind of organic culture for almost centuries before the colonialism. One British India governed the country. There was a like surprise spread of Christianities and Islams and so on. So they see those religions as the colonial religion, and they wanted to defend Buddhism as the indigenous culture, and they saw Christianity and Islam as the colonial religions. That also caused this anti-Islam and anti-Christian, and trying to protect Buddhism as a nationalist agenda. And when we discuss the class structure, like most of the Burmese people during the colonial era, they were poor peasants. At that time, there was no industrial advancement, so there was no industrial working class. There were more peasant class, like poor peasant class and so on. And that caused an issue because most of these peasants, they didn't really know much about like politics and social structures and so on. So all they see is through the lens of race, not from the class. They see it from the through lens of religion, not from the like political powers and so on. That was a big issue. But at the time, that was not reactionary, but because at that time they had this struggle for independence and national liberations and so on. So even they were using this right-wing elements of nationalism and so on, at that time that was appropriated. But thing goes wrong after the independence, because after the independence, British left. A lot of Indian officers left, but some chose to live. Some British people chose to adopt Burma as their primary country. And there were a lot of interracial, interethnic, inter-religion marriages and so on. And a lot of people chose to live in Burma. And that caused the issue because at that time, there was no British ruling class anymore. There was no Punjabi British Indian polices, Muslim British Indian polices. But a lot of Punjabis and Muslims decided to stay in Burma, and they became the scapegoat because a lot of people in Burma they still have this sense of seeing those people as the colonialists and so on. They couldn't really get rid of this hatred, and that caused an issue. So that is the one aspect of this xenophobic and racist idea. And then what happened is they have this strong pride in protecting Buddhism and their ethnicity, and that was one of the root cause of the issue. And so skipping to the independence. So once the independence is established, what happened is there were a lot of internal struggles to make Buddhism and the whole nationalist agenda to be progressive. There were some monks who were saying like, hey, this is wrong, hating people on the race and trying to maintain this kind of like religion as it is scary. We should try to criticize things and move on. So there were a lot of monks like that. And what happened was these kind of monks were oppressed really bad. A lot of them were forced to like submitted to mental asylum forcefully. A lot of them were arrested, and a lot of them were uh, how do we say, like they had to end their monkhood, like the religious scholarhood, because they had a different view from the conservative view. So this monk here, as you can see, is one of the monk who was arrested for his progressive Buddhism, and another pupil, another student of him, was dragged to mental asylum with the order of the Minister of Religious Affairs and Culture. But the government never apologized for those acts. And that was a legacy. That happened like a legacy. So that was around 1950, 1960s. And that legacy continued to happen even in 2010s. So in 2010, there was a monk. He said this conservative or this like traditionalist Buddhism is not appropriate. And he say he had these visions of Buddhism that is similar to Stephen Batchelor, who believe in Buddhism that has no future, like afterlife, before life, and the materialist kind of Buddhism, like a bit of atheistic Buddhism. And then he was sentenced to jail for 16 years for saying that. That is far similar to the Buddhism of Stephen Batchelor. But he was arrested 16 years, and he was released recently, but he couldn't move at all because he was under surveillance all the time. And there were a lot of gender apartheid as well. So in Western world, we have seen a lot of Buddhist monks and Buddhist female monks who have the same social status, who have the same privilege and so on. But in Burma, it is different. So in Burma, you cannot be a female monk. They created a class called Tilashim, which is like the one social class lower than the male monks. They are like servant of the male monks, and they tell them to beg for food, beg for money, and then give all the money back to the male monk. That is their role. So a lot of progressive movement trying to change that. So there was one monk that tried to say, we have this equal opportunity female monks in Sri Lanka in Western world, and that is compatible with the original teachings of Buddha. And he was boycotted. He was cancelled by the whole nation-wide movement of Buddhist monks, the nationalist and right-wing Buddhist monks. And after all, he was stoned. Like wherever he go, those monks like throw rocks at him, trying to attack him physically. So he had to end his monkhood, and he had to stay away from all the religious affairs. And that struggle didn't end there. After 20 or 30 years, after he was uh, physically attacked, physically assaulted, there were some female monks who dared to challenge that. Those female monks, they study at Sri Lanka. They saw the female monks that is from the same tradition, Theravada Buddhism. They saw that that is compatible with the original teachings of Buddha, and then they tried to become a female monk. They were fine until they decided to return to Burma. So as you can see, the lady in the photo here, so she had to come back to Burma from Sri Lanka because her dad was sick and was hospitalized. And what happened was, since she arrived to the airport, they arrested her, never let her reach to her dad, and they put her to insane prison, where most of the political prisoners are held. And the reason for her arrest was that she became a female monk, which is compatible with original Buddhist teachings, but in Burma that is not compatible in the political Buddhist, like the conservative lands. As a result, her father died. She couldn't meet her dad, but she was arrested. But finally, she managed to sign that she was wrong. She was forced to sign, otherwise be she might be stay dead in the prison. She might never get released. But she signed the paper. She admits she was wrong, and they released her back to Sri Lanka. So from Sri Lanka, she went back to America, and she became a monk again, female monk again. But she has a lot of trauma, so she couldn't maintain that monk status. So that's not against the oppression against the atheists and humanists. That's oppression against Buddhist and the Buddhist establishment. But a lot of those things, we had a hope in 2007. In 2007, there was this grass movement of monks who were pro-democracy, who were not acceptable of these ideas, but who were at least tolerated of these ideas. And they were anti-military as well. They tried to organize the protests peacefully, even when the government started to shoot them. The Buddhist monks, they were super peaceful at that time. They even walk around with no rocks. They didn't fight back. Even they were shot with the real bullets. They were just spreading love and peaceful and so on at that time. That was a once time history that we can see in Burma. 2007 Saffron Revolution. That's where most of us, even atheists and humanists, we had a huge respect in the movement of Buddhist monks. But that didn't last long because the military acknowledged their organizing power because that revolution was a nationwide revolution and that was not led by the politicians, neither from the right, neither from the left, but from the monks who are non-political in traditional sense. But they managed to make the whole national level strikes, national level protests. The military was even almost overthrown, but it was almost, but it was not. They shoot at the monks, causing a lot of hundreds of monks who were dead in numbers, like official numbers. There were a lot of monks who were never seen again. So probably thousands of monks were never well murdered, but never officially recorded. But there were some hundreds that was released officially as the dead number. So military noticed that. They noticed the organizing power that monks have. And what they try to do is they try to put their influence on those monks. And they try to make that using those colonial era issues that underline within our society. They use the anti-Muslim, anti-Indian, kind of anti-xenophobic and racist ideas. They try to radicalize these monks with those ideas. So before going that, so as I told earlier, like if we compare the Buddhism in Burma and the Western Buddhism, they are almost nothing similar because Western Buddhism, they allows LGBTQ, they are inclusive, they are based on compassion, they are based on wisdom, they claim at least, or they try to preach that. In Burma, they do the same as well, but there is a state oppression claiming to be Buddhist as well. Western Buddhism is woke in terms of anti-racist, inclusive of gender identities and so on. But in Myanmar Buddhism, that is different. There's a gender apartheid there. Women are getting arrested just for wearing the same yellow robe, just like the men. And a lot of like, let alone LGBT, it was the normal woman. So Western Buddhism is a bit different. It's a bit unique because it is trying to combine the best element of Theravada Buddhism and Mahayana Buddhism. But in Myanmar, it is different. They will try to dehumanize you for not practicing Buddhism. They will try to convert you. They will try to oppress you. But in Western Buddhism, you won't see something like that. So one of them has to be wrong. One of them has to be different from the original teachings of Buddha. So it is either Western Buddhism that is wrong, or it is either Burmese Buddhism that is wrong. And we are not too sure what is real, authentic representation of Buddhist teachings. So if it is Burmese Buddhism, I believe it has to be reformed or it has to be overthrown. When it comes to Western Buddhism, that is more on life individualist. So, and there was no oppression, so on. So I will let the audience judge about it. So going back to the political movement that is related to Buddhism and the nationalism. So what happened was there was a riot happened in 2012. So the military was aware of this monks' power to organize the revolution. So what they try to do is they try to start a lot of riots based on the racist idea, based on the xenophobic ideas. So there was one riot happened in Arakan state, which is a Buddhist nationalist concentrated area. Like a lot of people in those area are either like patriotic in terms of like nationalism and so on, and also devout Buddhist. And there was one Arakanese lady who was raped by some Rohingya Muslim people. And what happened was that sparked the riots, and several hundreds of people died from both sides, Buddhist sides and Muslim sides. And but that never was like that. That was not even about religion in the first place. It was about ethnicity, Arakan versus Rohingya. But what happened was when the military knows that, they try to make it appear like a religion. And lucky for them, Arakanese, they are mostly Buddhist, and Rohingya, they are mostly Muslims. So what happened is a lot of Buddhists in the whole country, they shared this solidarity to the Arakanese, And a lot of Muslim people in Myanmar, they share this sympathy and solidarity to the like Rohingya people, and that sparks a lot of issue. And the government tried to propaganda that Burma was indigenously Buddhist, never allowed the ethnicity that are Muslims, and they say there was no Rohingya. But when we talk about the histories and so on, Rohingya suggests it's just an Arabic term of Arakanese. It's the same people, maybe have a bit of like different unique dialect and so on, but they are from the same region. But the military managed to break that norms. They try to put that fear into the minds of the Buddhist people. They say that look at Pakistan, look at Afghanistan. They used to be Buddhist countries, now they are Islam countries. They put this kind of like fear mongering politics into Burmese Buddhist and Arakanese Buddhist, and that sparked this idea of this right wing politics of Burmese and Buddhist in nature in general, wanting to protect their religion, their ethnicities, and so on. So as I mentioned, Rohingya literally just mean inhabitant of Rohang, which necessarily was a Muslim name for Arakan, which means they were born in Arakan state. That's pretty much what the name is suggesting. But when it comes to the anti-Rohingya narrative, they are saying there are no Rohingya in the race. We only have Bengalis who were brought to famine. That's the xenophobic uh, idea that was coming from the political leader of the military. So all of these have the roots back in the colonial times. So the military just didn't make it happen out of nowhere because it was deeply rooted in the grassroots since the colonial time. Because when Burma was colonized by British India, there was a lot of there were a lot of different like uh, opposing political views at the time, even among the revolutionaries. Some were pro-Japan, like pro-fascist, in at the expense of anti-colonialism, and some were saying no, fascists are more scary. We have to be pro-colonialist against the fascists. And unfortunately, a lot of Muslims at that time wanted to protect British India. And a lot of Burmese and a lot of Buddhists, they wanted to overthrow the colonialist regimes of British India, and they welcomed the Japanese. At that time, fascism meant nothing because that was since the 1930s, 1920s. At the time, fascism is just the normal word coming from the left-wing tradition from Mussolini, who was a devoted communist at the time. And a lot of like fascist movement in Japan, they were originally far left movement as well. So, and at the time, that international had this alliance with the Nazis and so on. So at the time, fascist doesn't really mean evil. So generally speaking, there were Burmese and Buddhists who were pro-fascist and anti-colonialists. And on the other hand, we have some Rohingya Muslims who were pro-colonialists, anti-fascist. They spark. They have different interests, and they have the opposite interests. So they started killing each other. There were a lot of massacres done by the Rohingya Muslims, uh, aided by the British India against the pro-fascist British revolutionaries. So, somewhere around 20,000 British Arakanese were murdered by the Rohingya Muslims with the help of British India at that time. So there was like a small genocide happened. So that where the original hatred against the Muslims and like Indians and British from the British society. So for them, like Muslims and Christians unite and started to push back their revolutionary movement that is anti-colonialist in their terms. So that's where all these misconceptions and xenophobic and racist idea came from. And things were getting worse and worse. So the British India, they were super efficient, creating the identity-based divide and conquer kind of politics. So they promised these Rohingya Muslims that they will give them the Islamic state in that area. And Buddhists are like big no. We are like indigenously Buddhist, and we will stay that way. And that made it worse. After the independence, Rohingya Muslims demanded that they was quick from Burma, they will join Pakistan, and they want to become not secular Islamic state, and that sparked the whole issue again. So that is after the independence. The government at that time was not military. It was the social democratic government with the name called Anti-Fascist People League. So that government was against the Mujahideen. They had to attack them and so on. So, and then that narrative came in, like what the narrative is, the separationist country, like separationist movement. So they have this agenda of Muslims always trying to separate the countries and so on. So that historically fit into their narrative, and that's emerged again around 2012 when this Rohingya genocide happened. So the government tried to use all the historical narratives and deeply rooted anti-Muslim, anti-Christians, and anti-Rohingya racism. And then they say, see, this what they did in the history. They wanted to split our country and they wanted to form their Islamic state. That's the literal reasoning they give. And they say, we military, we know people don't want us, but we are the only one who can defend Buddhism. That's the promise they give them. And a lot of monks from those who lead that 2007 Saffron Revolution indeed switched side. A lot of them back in 2007, they were anti-military, pro-democracy. And then after 2012, they switched side. They pro-military and anti-democracy. They say, we like democracy, but we want to defend Buddhism from the Christianity and Islam. And they literally say that they had a lot of protests and they basically swing left to right. And that's it. And the whole military and this unholy alliance between the monks happened. And they say, we will protect Buddhism no matter what happens. So when they mention about protecting Buddhism, they protect from both sides, external threats and internal threats in their terms. So external threats, they mean people like us, like people who have the Muslim descendants, Muslim bloodlines, and so on, and Christians, and non-religious, atheists, humanists. And internal threats, they put it against LND government at that time, the main opposition party of the military junta. But they used to work together. So this is the photo evidence where the racist monk, Time magazine called him Buddhist Bin Laden, and the face of Buddhist terror, they call him that. But this flag here is the flag of All Burma Federation of Student Union, which is the pro far left pro-communist party of Burma Student Union. They work together with NLD, the main opposition government against the military. Party, I mean, not government, opposition party against the military. NLD is no mean far left, it is center left or center right, but it was the main democratic opposition against the military. They worked together because they made this united front against the military junta. They worked together until 2012. After 2012, they switched side. They became pro-military, anti-left, against their former comrades, against the LND party, against everyone. And as you can see the monk here, so this monk used to be one of the influential leader in the interfaith movement. He was once left by most Muslims in Burma, most Christian leaders in Burma. He was even invited by Iranian regime as a Buddhist scholar who they respect. They even offer a lot of help kind of services in Iran for free for this monk. He was pro NLD until 2012. After 2012, he say, "Hey, I like democracy. I like LLD. I don't like military. But military, they are the only one to defend Buddhism. I'm protecting them." And right now, this is the latest photo. He was visiting Russia with the current military junta leader. This is the statue of Lenin. that is oxymoronic. Lenin was anti-religion, and a lot of Buddhist monks proudly taking photo with Lenin. That is more than oxymoronic. But on the other hand, they are forming alliance within the most influential monks, who was even influential to the Muslim community in Burma. And right now, he is a fellow puppet of this military junta. And recently, it was around 2019 and 2020, he publicly spoke against a lot of LGBT people. He say he saw a lot of gays in the Western world. He doesn't want that to happen in Burma, and military junta approve of that one. So this one is just introducing you to the far right Buddhist nationalists in Burma. This group is the most, the one on the left hand side is the most popular, most grassroots. It is not just some French people leading, it is the grassroots movement. So this group is not some French people who were trying to be far right in terms of politics. This is a grassroots movement. In 2012, almost the whole country put their stickers and boycotted to sell to Muslims, to Christians, mainly targeting Muslims. They refused to take Muslims as their customers. They refused to rent houses. They refused to sell products. And that was a nationwide movement, and that sustained for at least a year. And that was a grassroots movement. It reached the membership of at least a few millions. It's not just some hundreds of thousands, it was millions. And that was the formal affiliation of membership. That was not just some influences in the population. That was the literal official membership. After 2015, they went after the NLD government against Aung San Suu Kyi, and that's when they decreased their popularity. But they are still influential in a lot of sense. Even during these days, even after the coup, they have this strong grassroots base that are pro-military, actively helping the military junta against the people who are revolutionary. So I just wanted to close my presentation with these quotes. I think a lot of you might be familiar to the first person, Daniel DeLeon, the founder of Industrial Workers of the World. He used to say that the capitalist class is interested in keeping the working man divided among themselves. That was true for Burma, but it was not capitalist class, it was the military. They divide the working people, they divide the poor peasants with their race, ethnicities, and religions. So they couldn't come after the military junta. Even the monks that used to be leading the revolution against the military, now they are pro-military and they are defending it actively, even giving their life. And another one is one of the far left politicians from Burma. He say one of the reasons that Burma never able to reach the prosperity of its neighboring nations is because of its adherence to religious belief. And that was true too. Burma is not a secular country. Burma is a Buddhist country. And it has a lot of events that are sponsored by the state, costing millions of dollars, even though they couldn't lend those money to the poor peasants and poor working people, not even to the startups like small businesses. And when it comes to the social justice, I like this guy called Priya Ramasamy from India. He say, if God is the root cause of our degradation, destroy that God. And if it's the religion, destroy it. I think that's what we need in Burma. Because in Burma, the Buddhism we have is gender apartheid. It is homophobic, transphobic, racist, and xenophobic. And I don't think that is what Buddhism means. And they are arresting everyone that is challenging them. I personally believe they might even arrest Buddha if he come back and say this is wrong. So I think for Burma, the only way forward is to find a new progressive Buddhism, or we have to destroy that entirely. That's all from me. If you have some questions, I think I might overwhelm a lot of informations to you because Burma is not a popular topic in Australia. So I'm sorry about it, but if you have any questions, please feel free to let me know.
Let's move on to questions. Let me start off with a question. It seems that like many countries, Burma is racked by religious divisions and racial divisions, but the religious divide intensifies things. Has there been or is there any proposal to advocate a secular position in Burma, particularly in those that are now fighting against the regime? Do they have any sort of unifying principle that could actually restore peace and unity between all the people and the religions?
As of now, the opposition government, which we call National Unity Government, so NUG, so they have this constitution that is secular and that is multicultural. So the main thing of this revolution is federalism and democracy. So federalism in terms of self-determination. So we have around 150 ethnicities in Burma. So all of them, they have different interests and they have their indigenous geographical location. Some areas, they have disputes between the groups. So the whole country, it is a bit hard to say, but the majority of the area right now, they have reached to a common goal of democracy and federalism. And the constitution is based on secularism. So there is a hope.
Well, that's good. There is some hope that there's a future there, because as we know, secularism is the best solution.
I was a bit curious. There was you were claiming in the past there was a fascist government in Burma. What era was that exactly?
So that was not like fascist government. That was more of around 1920s to 1930s. So in Burma, we had like the British India at the time. And so a lot of people, a lot of the revolutionaries, they will consider themselves as anti-colonialists. And at the time, the fascism from Japan. Right.
Yeah. Japan was probably, you could describe Japan as genuinely fascist.
Yeah.
And a lot of European countries were fascist. But Burma was just, perhaps they had a very conservative government.
Since 1962, we have this military government that is conservative, that is like NASPO kind of like, they call themselves Burmese way of socialism. That is authoritarian, that is, really oppressive, and they messed up a lot of things, but they were secular at that time. And so it is a really complicated phenomena. Like a lot of political groups in Burma, they have their like goods and bads and so on. But generally speaking, at the time, there were fractions that were anti-colonialists and that were pro-fascist. Like, so most of the anti-colonialist people, they think themselves pro-fascist because at the time, fascism was like also the enemy of the colonialism. And on the other hand, there were some people who say, no, fascism is more scarier than colonialism. At least colonialism is a lot better than fascism. So we have like two fractions.
No, but are you surely you're talking fascism, you're talking prior to World War II?
Yep, that's correct.
I see Andrew's got his hand up.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. These various conflicts between parties in Burma, are any of them being, spilled over in Australia? Do we have various Burmese communities in Australia which are in conflict with each other?
Yes, there are some. So in Burma, like as of now, not historically, as of now, we have NUG government, that is the main opposition government against the military junta, but there are that alternative political parties. They want to be representing people. Those groups are also present in Australia as well. But generally speaking, all the revolutionary fractions against the military are still united. They have this opposing views and so on, but they managed to form the united front, at least for now, against the military junta. So far at the moment, even though we have a lot of Burmese political refugees and fractions that have opposition to each other, but they are united under the flag of anti-military junta for now.
Tonoi, welcome to our group, and you have your hand up.
Thank you, Hein. I actually have 3 questions. Question number 1, during the Rohingya genocide, we have seen Aung San Suu Kyi and her complete silence, for which she was heavily criticized. If Burmese military dictators, if they are defeated, is Suu Kyi's position attainable? Is her leadership attainable? Number 2, you mentioned that the Buddhism in Myanmar and Buddhism in West is 2 complete different things. And this is something it's not just Buddhism. About all other religion, we see this. In the West, they have one face, even Islam, more moderate. But if you go also in different geographies like Bangladesh, Malaysia, Indonesia, Islam is more moderate. And in some countries, it is extreme. Same applies to Christianity. Let's say in Africa, it's very extreme. In the United States as well, in some states, it's very extreme. And in some places, it is very moderate. Is it religion, or religion changes its face in different geography, in different countries, in different societies, let's say Australia? So does that mean that a society or a community plays a role in changing of religion? Okay. Question 3, in Myanmar, there are 151 ethnic groups, but out of those ethnic groups, there are 3 or 4 are major ethnic groups like Karen, Rakhines, you have Shans, and all these different ethnic groups have their own rebel military forces who are fighting. These rebel military forces are supported by, because they cannot fight a war without arms, and arms are supplied by different parties, especially the neighboring countries. Let's say Thailand, China for the Shans, current Thailand, Rakhine, Bangladesh, and India, or even China. That means all these countries, neighboring countries, has different interests there. Can Burma be a united country after the war if the rebels win it, or they're going to be divided into ethnic lines?
I managed to take the notes. So let's go to the first question. On the Rohingya genocide, Aung San Suu Kyi was silent. She even defended military junta at the ICJ. So, and of course, there were a lot of cancel culture against her. Like UN even tried, and a lot of international community tried to push back, and they even retract her Nobel Peace Prize. And so right now she is detained, and that saved her, like in terms of like pragmatically speaking, this coup saved her. Otherwise, she will become the genocide apologist. But now she was just simply defending military junta, but her role was not completed because the court was never finished. There was no result from the ICJ yet. Now she is detained, and there were some like reputations coming back to her because she again now is a political prisoner. So I think this coup saved her image, but after this coup, let's say hypothetically, if the revolution was succeeded, I think like for the people in Burma, especially the youth, especially the young people, I think we should go beyond her because she has been a leading political figure since 1980s. So it has been 3 to 4 decades, and she is almost 70s in her age. So I think it is time for us to go beyond her. It is time for us to go to the values instead of the like central figure, or let's say personality cult or something like that. I think we should go beyond that. So I think, personally speaking, in my opinion, after the revolution, I think we have to go beyond our San Suu Kyi. We have to let her in the history, and we have to unite in the position of political values, just like secularism, social justice, and so on. I think that might be my answer for the question number one. And the another one is the religion or the social factors. Like the second question, for example, you mentioned it is not just Burma that we are seeing different phases of the religion. Like, for example, Islam in Pakistan is different from Islam in UK. I think from the news that I'm receiving right now, they might not be the case in the near future, but generally speaking, yes, I think the thing that is different for the Buddhism is that, so when we talk about Christianities and Islams, there are several verses that we can literally take it and try to justify the matters of apostasy and so on. But in terms of Buddhism, there is no literal quotes or literal scriptures that demands the non-believers to be killed, or for the people to have premarital sex to be stoned or something like that. So Buddhism is different in that sense. But in Burma, it is not just Buddhism. It is even including the nationalistic rhetoric, xenophobia, racism, and so on. So that's why, so they change the Buddhism into something that is totally different from Buddhism itself. So, and that make it worse. But they are also trying to like justify that with all these pseudo-Buddhist narratives and so on. So I think in terms of religion, that's the issue we always face when we talk to the, not to the atheist society, but to the left-wing society in generally speaking, to the like global left. Buddhism is unique. It is different from Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. There is no literal text that is like genocidal, that is advocating of killing someone and so on. There's no literal text. But as I mentioned, it is more sort of like philosophy. It is really similar to postmodernism kind of thing. It's more similar to Nietzsche idea, you know, like someone who is good can interpret Nietzsche's idea in a good way, but Nazi interpret that in a bad sense. And like that has a lot of big, terrible consequences. I think that's the rule for Buddhism. It depends on our interpretations. And when it comes to that question, yes, that's one of the biggest issues we are having right now. Like Burma has a lot of ethnic groups, but there are 4 to 5 major ethnicities. So Shan, Karen, Kachin, and Arakan and Burmese, they are like the majority and the biggest ethnic groups. And they even have like, except for the Burmese, the rest of the groups, they have their own military organizations. So, and yes, the imperialism of China, it affects us. The Arakan army, Shan, and most of the Kachin, in generally, like almost all the revolutionary forces are currently under the imperialism of China. Because, like, for example, as you all might have seen the news of Operation 1027, so the whole military operation was approved by China, and the operation was ceded. After that, China say, no, we don't do that anymore. And all those rebels stop fighting against the military. They are now in peace with them. And that's the role China is playing. And it has its own economic interest in Burma. So I think in general, like personally speaking, I find more inspiration from the Middle Eastern politics of Rojava, how the Kurdish people rebel against Iran, Turkey, and ISIS at the same time. And they go beyond the Kurdish national identity, and they manage to build this solidarity-based conscience that is inclusive for all the people in the Rojava area, in the Kurdistan area. It is not just Kurdish people. It has a lot of Armenians. It has a lot of Iranians. You have a lot of like people from the West helping the people in Kurdish. So that's the kind of narrative that's kind of outlook we are expecting in Burma as well. Like we have a lot of ethnicity. So instead of forming one ethnicity, following their revolutionary armed forces, they can have this cross-ethnic, cross-religious, multicultural societies that are democratic in nature. I think we could dream of something like that. So I don't think Burma will be stay the same after this revolution. It might got split, it might got separated, and I think that's for good reason as well, because some areas there are a lot of hatred against each other. As I mentioned, like the Burmese military, they try to represent Burmese Buddhism, and so this identity, and try, like they commit a lot of genocides, not just to Rohingya. They commit genocide to Karen in the 1980s. They commit genocide to Kachins and Shans in the 1960s. And so for those people, they don't see Burmese military doing that. They saw Burmese doing that. And that's a problematic as well. So we cannot really build solidarity on these race issues. So I think it is better to split, and then we can reach to a point where we have this mutual respect and so on. So I think it is much better to see a small Rojava kind of places. I think that would be more reasonable in Burma right now.
Just following on from that, when going back to the situation of Aung San Suu Kyi and genocide,
yeah,
it seemed to me that she had to take that position because she was being forced to by the military. Or do you think that, she would have taken a different stance had she been free to do so?
I think it was not entirely her fault to take that position, because in Burma, we had this military junta since 1962. There were a lot of armed struggles against the military junta from both left and right, like communists, ethnic nationalists, like from far left to far right. A lot of people trying to rebuild this military junta since 1960s. And all of them failed to do that. And in 1988, a lot of people were just fed up with the situation. They are like, okay, if we have to stay under this government, we will stay, because revolution, we have been doing that for like 4 decades, 5 decades. It never went well, so we don't really want the revolution anymore. We just want to live like peacefully and so on. And that's why her politics gets popular in 1988. And so after that, almost no military struggle against the military. Even there were some, they are like small militia groups, not even like the army standard. So at the time, there was a shift in Burmese politics, like from the armed struggle to the parliamentary politics. So Aung San Suu Kyi, she is the, how do we say, like the really strong believer of this parliamentary politics, non-armed struggle kind of thing, just like Gandhi, like a peaceful kind of things. So she was trapped because she couldn't really rebel the military junta in Rohingya genocide thing, because she has no political power in hands on the ground level assessment. She is just a normal consultative of the nation, but she doesn't really have the power. Her government still is the government, but almost 25% of the parliament was occupied by the military without election. Only around 60 to 70% was elected. The rest is filled by the alliance with the military junta. So they don't really have full control of the government. and military and the police department, all of the departments that has the gangs, that has the military assets, they were governed by the military. So I don't think she is entirely, it is entirely her fault, but I think because she is a Nobel Peace Prize winner, she has been an advocate of human rights and so on. So given this background, I think it is like if her ethic is more genuine, I'd say like staying against genocide is a good position. But unfortunately, she is not a humanist. You know, she is a politician. So she took the best out of the situation, I guess.
My question is about the current situation. As I understand it, the military is struggling against the opposition. Some towns have been lost, and the government has been forced to introduce conscription to reinforce the army to continue the fight against the rebels. So that seems to be a significant setback. Doesn't mean that the rebels are going to win. But the question also, you mentioned about China. China was supporting the military in the beginning, but your comment that has changed a little bit. And does China support any of the rebel groups?
So in general, in Burma right now, China played two-faced. It hasn't bet on the horses yet. It seems like it is observing. Like historically, it was always pro-military because the military was the governing body, the government of the nations and so on. But since after the revolution, they are calling for the like peaceful and sustainable geographical like control for Burma, because they have a lot of economic interests in Burma right now. Because back in 2018, there were almost around hundreds of protests against the China state-owned enterprises in Burma for the wage theft and so on. So there were a lot of like labor like syndicalist movement and so on in Burma. But right now, they couldn't do their business anymore because of the war. And a lot of like the pipelines going to China from Burma, the like gas and so on, they were threatened by the rebels to blown away. And China really afraid that. And they are like, if someone touch it, we will enforce militarily. And they said that in a public statement. So most of the rebel groups, they cannot touch those areas. Even there is a war going on between rebels and the revolutionaries, they couldn't touch those areas, both sides. And China state is maintaining its relationship with the military. At the same time, it is selling weapons to Arakan army, like the military groups in the Shan area and area from the Kachin Independence Army as well. So basically, they have two faces right now. They are pro-military because the state owns the government and the nation. They are also pro-militias like Arakan army and so on, because they are the main customer for the weapons and so on at the moment. So what we have seen so far, like one of the military group in Shan state, they even have their air forces right now. They buying those from the China. So that is beyond beyond thinkable for the normal rebel group to own the air force that is made from China. And so China is simply playing double face to both military and the revolutionary forces, because it has its economic interest in Burma right now, because there are a lot of investment going on in Burma to them. Yeah.
Did you say it was the gas pipelines that China's getting gas from Burma?
Yeah, and a lot of like electricities and so on also are supplying to China from Burma as well. There are lots of like dams in Burma that are supplying electricity to China. So they just want to protect those economic interests. So that's why they want peace in the nation. That's why they are like discuss. They always encourage people from both sides to discuss.
Yeah, so just curious about this. As far as I've seen, Buddhists have male monks,
Yep.
and they also have nuns. Now, I'm a bit confused about what the situation in Burma is. Is being a Buddhist nun illegal?
Okay, so that is a bit different. So what I can explain is, so we have monks, like male monks and female monks. So nuns is more like the way that like Christianity use in the Western world. But in Burma, we use monks, and like we use the monks. So the monks mean bhikkhu, like you see the yellow color robes and so on. So we have male monks, female monks in the Western world. But in Myanmar, we only have male monks, no female monks. But you have nuns. Nun is not legal, or not legal, not it's like legal, but it is not in the religious teaching of Buddhism. Only female monks are in the religious teaching. So nun is like in an official way that they created to serve them, like to serve the male monks. So in Western world, when you see female monk and male monk, they are the same, almost same social status. But in Burma, if you see one monk and a few nuns, those nuns are more like slaves to the male monks. So they basically go around, collect the food, collect the money, and give it back to the monk. And the monk don't have to show the respect to the nuns, but the nuns only have to show the respect to the monks. Yeah. So, but they don't really allow female monks in Burma. But there are a lot of like movement in Thailand, Sri Lanka, and in the West as well for the female monks. But in Myanmar, they don't really allow that. Yeah.
Can I just ask, how does that compare with the situation in Thailand? Because I recognize there's a little bit of a struggle there for female monks to get recognized. Is that right?
Yeah. The only difference is like Thailand, there is no state operations for being a Buddhist monk, like male, female Buddhist monk. Like the monk community might not like it, but the government will arrest you, put you in jail for being a female monk. But in Burma, it happens. That's the only difference. So even if the monks didn't like it, like her being a female monk in Thailand, at least she is safe. Like, you know, they can boycott her, they can do cancel culture and so on, but physically she is there. She might have her own supporters supporting her like economically and so on. But in Burma, they don't even allow that. They are like, you go to prison, that's it. And they will only release you from the prison if you decided not to do that anymore.
Well, if there's not going to be any more questions, we might thinking about closing the meeting.
Yep.
At this stage. You have
Yeah,
a
that is interesting because
background. So
yeah, that is.
been providing a very interesting talk for us tonight.
Thank you. No worries.
So let's thank Hein for his very informative talk. Next month, we're going to have a speaker from the Skeptics. Chris Guest is talking about sphericity, history of the idea that the Earth is a sphere. After the lecture tonight, you're welcome to join us for tea and coffee in the kitchen. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.